agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you, Mr. President. 1 year ago, the hope of millions of Syrians was realized when President Assad fled the country. As they celebrated earlier this month the events that culminated on 8 December 2024, Syrians again reaffirmed their abiding belief in peace, stability, prosperity, and justice for their country, despite the undeniable and daunting challenges before them. During the Security Council's visit to Syria on 4 December, Council members saw firsthand the opportunities and difficulties the country is facing. The hopes and expectations are high, and the challenges ahead are immense. Syrians have made great strides since a year ago, but serious obstacles remain. The government of Syria has restored state institutions and begun to integrate armed factions under a single command. It has issued a constitutional declaration and formed a new cabinet. Also, indirect legislative elections were held in October. A day of national dialogue also took place. Several key institutions, including the full formation of the People's Assembly and the Constitutional Court, could be established soon. Syrians have also returned home in high numbers. Over 1 million refugees and almost 2 million IDPs have gone back to their areas of origin. Many countries have lifted bilateral sanctions on Syria. Just yesterday, the U.S. Congress repealed the Caesar Act, and last month, the Security Council adopted Resolution 2799, which removed designations on President Sharaa and Minister of Interior Khattab. Humanitarian access has improved, but more needs to be done. You will hear more about this from my colleague from OCHA, Assistant Secretary General Joyce Masuya. In another positive development, the Syrian government and the Syrian Democratic Forces reached an agreement on 10 March. As the end-of-year target for implementation of the agreement approaches, we encourage the parties to engage in constructive steps on its security and political aspects. We also urge the parties to engage with the Amman Roadmap of September and implement confidence-building measures to restore trust and bring stability to Ceuta. Mr. President, the levels of violence in Syria have declined notably. However, the situation on the ground is fragile and intercommunal dynamics remain tense. Years of conflict and decades of repressive rule and human rights violations exacerbated tensions along sectarian lines. Tragically, these tensions have boiled over in the past year. The large-scale violence in the coastal region in March, a terrorist attack targeting a church in Damascus in June, and the violence in Druze-majority Ceuta in July. In the north and east, tensions also persist between the Syrian army and the Syrian Democratic Forces. In many cases, hate speech and disinformation campaigns have fueled communal strife and fear. Hundreds of civilians have been killed in the violence, leading to new displacement. Demands for protection and accountability have intensified as reports of summary executions and abductions targeting specific communities, including Alawites, continue. The United Nations condemns the violence unreservedly. We urge that transparency remains central to the investigations launched by the authorities into these episodes and that perpetrators are held accountable. As Council members saw during the visit, including in meetings with the National Commissions on Missing Persons and Transitional Justice and the investigative committees for the Coast and Ceuta, work has begun on dealing with the past and on reconciliation. But more remains to be done. International encouragement and expertise can complement national efforts to sustain peace, justice, and accountability. Mr. President, Israeli airstrikes and incursions in the south have aggravated this security situation. In late November, an incursion and occupying strikes by the Israeli Defense Forces in the town of Beit Jinn killed 13 people, according to Syrian authorities. They also caused displacement, forcing families from Beit Jinn to flee to nearby areas. I reiterate the Secretary-General's call on Israel to refrain from violations of Syrian sovereignty and territorial integrity. I also call on the parties to respect the terms of the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement. Resuming dialogue between Syria and Israel on security arrangements is imperative. Strong international and regional engagement to support this track is essential. Mr. President, there is continued domestic, regional, and international focus on counterterrorism efforts in Syria, with concerns regarding the presence of foreign terrorist fighters and an ISIL resurgence. In a worrying development, a joint U.S.-Syrian patrol was attacked late last week near Palmyra, killing 2 U.S. soldiers and 1 civilian interpreter, and injuring several others. The Syrian government has condemned the attack, which they stated was carried out by a member of the Syrian security forces suspected of harboring extremist views. The United States has attributed the attack to ISIL and vowed serious retaliation. The prevalence of conventional arms and challenges with stockpile management pose an additional security challenge. Landmines and unexploded ordnance continue to kill and maim Syrians daily. All this points to the need for the political transition to be accompanied by a Syrian program of security sector reform and disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Mr. President, the Office of the Special Envoy continues to be fully engaged with the government of Syria and Syrian societies. Over this past year, the office supported the Syrian-led and Syrian-owned transition process with advice on constitutional and electoral matters. They've also supported reconciliation and transitional justice efforts in close consultation with national authorities. All of their work is to support an inclusive transition that fosters trust and legitimacy, as this council has called for. To do so with greater impact, the office seeks to be on the ground to engage in a structured and supportive way throughout this transition. Mr. President, the shadows of the past continue to haunt the Syrian people. True healing can only begin through a full reckoning with this history. By addressing the fate of the missing, ensuring accountability for the gravest atrocities, including the use of chemical weapons, and confronting the horrors of war without compromise. Inclusive dialogue among all Syria's components, genuine national reconciliation, sanctions relief, and sustained international support will be essential for the security of Syria and the region. It will be key to restoring investor confidence and laying the foundation for Syria's reconstruction. The full and meaningful participation of Syrian women in shaping that future is essential. I'm pleased to note that Miriam Jalabi will brief today from civil society. Long a stalwart for the participation of women in Syrian political life, she is a co-founder of the Syrian Women's Political Movement. Mr. President, we welcome the continued dialogue with the Security Council at this pivotal moment for Syria. After so much loss of life and suffering, the Syrian people are hopeful for their future and ready to take on the challenges before them. The United Nations is here to support them. Thank you.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Joyce Msuya.